You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Today we're looking at consumer research, and what we found out is that consumers are in a better mood than they were a year ago. And that's good news. Bad news is they're still not in a great mood. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into consumer perceptions. What are they thinking about the economy? What are they thinking about convenience store jobs? What are they thinking about crime? That's going to be our discussion today. So joining us is Adam Rosenblatt. He is founding partner of Bold Decision, which is a polling firm that NACS has worked with for a longer, actually working with Adam for a long time now in understanding the consumer psyche, what is going on in people's heads. And the reason we do that is if we understand what's going on in consumers' minds, we can build out messages that attract them, whether on an industry-wide basis or inside your stores. So welcome, Adam. Let's start talking about what consumers are thinking now. And want to just set it up. Sure, what is the big takeaway from this survey that we're talking about related to prices, jobs, and crime?
Absolutely. Great to be back, Jeff. We looked at the consumers. We looked at 600 throughout the whole entire country, a representative portrait of the Americans and the drivers. And people are feeling better, but they're not feeling great. I think that really is a good way of describing what's going on. There's a lot of things going on this year. We're, of course, in a presidential, so that politics seeps into things to some degree. But there's a lot of topics going on, from inflation and prices to crime, but then jobs and just the economy overall. So better. We're not in the place where we were 4 years ago during the pandemic, but we're not yet back to normal for a lot of folks. And they're not yet back to happy for most folks.
And good point that you raised around politics, and not just the presidential election, but any incumbent running. And Adam, obviously, you do an awful lot of work polling with candidates. But generally, what you want to do when you're going to an election is, if you're an incumbent, you want to talk about how good things are. If you're challenging the incumbent, you want to talk about how bad things are. So all of those things will interrelate in what we hear across all of these campaigns over the coming months, not just the presidential, right?
Correct. And gas price is so influential, and we see this in the data. It's so influential in how people think about the economy, how it shapes all their views on all sorts of things. And I'm not putting on an economist hat here to say what impact gas price and crude has on inflation, all other things, even though, of course, it does. But for an everyday consumer, that's the price that they see, right? When they're going and fueling their car, for the most part, most Americans are still driving. That's their main source of getting to work, getting to school, doing whatever things they do in their life. And they're not going out and buying a new car every single day or every single few weeks, but they are filling up their tank. So the price that they see at the pump very much has an impact on their day-to-day life. And we've seen this over years. When we ask them in a survey, what's the price of gas? They actually do accurately know what's the price of gas. They're paying attention. It's not some abstract price. So it has a major impact. And of course, the price varies place by place, but the price doesn't vary for different demographics. It's not like we have a different price for people who are old versus people who are young, or people who are men or people who are women. The gas price is the same for everybody. It sure does vary a little bit regionally, and it does vary a little bit based on sort of where you live, but it is the defining factor that impacts how people think about the economy. And obviously inflation's happening on all sorts of things, but consumers are accustomed to fluctuation when it comes to gas prices. They do know that gas price goes up and it goes down. Where's it going to be from one day to the next? I only do political polling. I can't predict the gas price.
Nor can we, because we represent the market. And as any lawyer knows, that's collusive behavior. So I won't go there either. So I promise this isn't going to be a political discussion, and it's not going to be a reading of a litany of numbers. But last point related to politics is incumbents will want to say gas prices are lower than pick a moment in time. the challengers will want to say gas prices are higher than pick a moment in time. We also know that 83% of Americans, according to the survey, say that gas prices impact their feeling about the economy. So a watch out for us as an industry is it's going to be a political issue. And when it's a political issue, there's usually a blame game associated with that. So it's something that we'll just have to we see this all the time. People are never happy about gas prices, but it's something that might have heightened awareness this year as we go through the year. We'll talk about how we might deal with some of those things. How do you have a conversation with a customer and create be blaming you over the gas price? So we'll get to that, I guess, a little bit later. But what else, Adam, is driving consumer psyche right now?
So that's a great question. And when we look not just at the gas price, but overall inflation, people are having to make different changes in their lives. We've seen this year over year, but especially now. We asked, have higher prices caused you or your family to adjust spending habits in recent months? 36% say that it's caused them a lot to change a lot of their spending habits. And another 39% say it's caused them to change some of their spending habits. It's huge to see numbers like that people are actually changing. 3 out of 4 people are changing what they do in their everyday life. But again, they can't quite change driving, right? They still have to fuel up. So we're going to see, as we look bigger picture, not just in the survey, but also the ripple effect in the economy, is people are going to be making changes in their lives. How often are they going to go into the store? They might, if they're paying cash, right? They might be going inside the store. If they have to use the bathroom, they're still going to go inside the store. But how many items are they going to buy? Well, that's going to be impacted based on how much money is available, not just because of how much they were paying at the pump or technically inside the store for the gas, but what are the rest of the prices? So this is something that's having a big ripple effect. And again, going back, this is what's impacting their view on the economy. It's why people today are more often than not saying they have a negative feeling towards the economy. And they're even mixed on how things are going locally. They're not feeling great right now.
And related to that, when people are stressed, they have to make a decision, and this is oversimplifying things. Do they want convenience or do they want value? And convenience is more prized when things are feeling really good. Value is more prized when things are not feeling so good. So probably an opportunity to look at value and what you're able to present to your customers. Now, we'll throw out some more numbers there, but this what we're talking about is in the April issue of NACS magazine. So you also can read it there. We have charts, numbers, all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're jogging and you have a pen out right now, you can put it back down. So we've talked about the consumer psyche and prices. One other thing worth mentioning is we asked, how does our industry stack up to others in terms of customer service and the experience? And I use experience/value together, because if they feel like it's value, and we don't mean just price, you still have a shot at growing your sales. And that's
Absolutely.
Something we also found in this survey.
One thing that I actually like, here's positive news. We asked them, thinking about the last time you went into a convenience store, how would you rate your overall experience? Excellent, good, fair, or poor? We had almost 1 in 4 saying excellent, 23%. That's actually quite good. In fact, it's excellent, quite literally. There's 51% who said good. So taken together, we've got 74%, almost 3 in 4 people who are giving us excellent or good marks for the last time they went into a store. That's really, really great. There's only 4% who said they had a poor experience last time they went into a store. Now, honestly, chances are they might not go back to that store having that type of experience. So it's very promising to see that number is so low. But there's 22% who said they had a fair experience when the last time they went into a store. I don't exactly know why that could be. There's a variety of different reasons for that. But it's something that we keep our eyes on, of what's going on. What are sort of the great stores doing? The stores that are giving an excellent experience. A lot of that might be coming from the employees, actually, because from one store to the next, the products are often the same. A candy bar you buy at one store is not necessarily proprietary to another store. Same with the gas at the pump, right? We're asking about the experience. The fueling itself is not necessarily different, and the fuel they put in the car is not necessarily different from one store to the next in terms of their experience, but the people who they interact with, that makes a big difference. And that's where I think we in the industry have a big role to play, and all the people who are the front line. The products are not really the front line. It's the people that are the front line within the industry. And that's where they can help improve the customer experience.
You segued right into our second topic, which is about what people think about jobs within the industry and how that impacts any other perception related to our industry and whether or not they come inside, whether or not they're happy. So we dove in and we asked different questions related to convenience store jobs. First one we wanted to know was, in setting up, is a convenience store job attractive? Just getting a general sense, whether or not people want to work in a convenience store job or not. We wanted to know what they thought about how we pay within the industry.
So the good news is on
results.
This topic, I mostly have positive things to say, but I have some sort of neutral things to say too, which, again, neutral is better than bad. So I'll literally say it. Generally speaking, do you have a positive or negative view towards convenience store jobs? 36% have a positive view. Only 10% have a negative view. So that's a 3-to-1, almost 4-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. But if anybody's actually doing the math there, you're probably saying, wait, that doesn't add up to 100. That's correct, because almost half of them have no opinion, right? This is not something that people in their everyday life think about, right? Convenience store jobs. So that's where there's opportunity to tell positive stories about this. Chances are the people who had a fair opinion or a poor opinion of the industry, it might be because they had a negative experience. For the most part, this is not something people think about. So there's a lot of opportunity within your individual store to define and tell people about the jobs and that they're good jobs. Even if you're not necessarily trying to hire people, you're just trying to communicate to your customer. But that's going to improve, because in the absence of this, they might go negative, which it's good that they're not, but they could easily be persuaded the other way as well, with a bad experience or with a bad interaction.
And also related to salary, I was looking at the numbers here, and we asked, what do you think convenience store wages are in your area? And 50% said they're at minimum wage. And this is, of course, we're talking about frontline employees. 35% said above minimum wage. And when I was looking at the chart, I was thinking, well, the other 15 must be below minimum wage. And it's like, wait, you can't do that. The other 15% was don't know. So here you have in our industry, or thinking about our industry, half of the U.S. population thinks we pay minimum wage. 35% think we pay more than minimum wage. So there's an opportunity there to tell a story where your wages are, depending on the market too, that these are great starter jobs. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But there's opportunities to talk about your wages, because there's a misperception in the industry that it's a minimum wage job.
I think of it, putting on a political hat and thinking of it as a political campaign, those don't knows are essentially undecided voters. And we could swing those to us. We should actually have a majority of people thinking that people are paid above the minimum wage, especially if that is in fact true. One of the questions that we asked, just open-ended, what do you think the average hourly wage is for a convenience store employee in the area where you live? And obviously we saw some variations in the Northeast, in the West, where minimum wages are higher. They did actually report on average about a $2 higher anticipated wage of what it is. In the South and the Midwest, it was a little bit lower, but on average, it was $13. That's really what the average American psyche is for what convenience store employees are being paid. But they have a lot of other thoughts about these jobs too, and we can get into that on how they feel.
Well, one of the things, the recent NACS Coca-Cola Retailing Research Council came out with a study looking at convenience store jobs. And there's much more work to be done there. There's some great takeaways that we're going to look at or build out as an industry. And we think there's a lot of room to tell stories around convenience store jobs. And as part of that, or related to that, we set up some questions that we asked consumers about convenience store jobs. Some of them were positive, some of them were negative. How did those
so
all rank out?
Unfortunately, one of the ones that has the highest level of strong agreement is one that is a bit negative, even if it's factually true. And it's that people recognize that the challenges of working at a convenience store make it a high burnout, high turnout, a high turnover job, right? That's a challenging proposition, but that's also factually true, right? We are 24/7, most of the stores. That means, somebody is there even at odd hours. There's always trucks coming in. There's always customers to be dealt with at all hours of the day. It's just the nature of the job, and that can't necessarily be modified. So 76% agree with that statement. But here's some other positive news is people do see it as a good first job, right? 82% actually agree that convenience stores provide good first jobs for those looking to enter the workforce. So that's a great opportunity. But again, to go a little bit negative, unfortunately, people think that working at a convenience store today is more difficult than it was 5 years ago. There's 77% who agree with that. And one of the reasons I think this relates to another question that we asked, and apologies to everybody when they put on their consumer hat right now and not their industry hat, but we saw 64% agree with the following statement. Customers are generally rude and disrespectful towards people who work in convenience stores. So there's a big lack of empathy and a big lack of civility that we're seeing throughout society today. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing when people saying convenience store jobs are more difficult than they were 5 years ago. It's the general sentiment that we're seeing across all types of things. We'll touch on crime in a little bit, which I think relates to that as well. But there's a lot of negativity and a lot of anger that's out there. And unfortunately, those frontline workers are sometimes experiencing that at all hours of the day. And that's what's making some of this more challenging for the actual employees. So again, these are all, you could take it from the negative side, but we can also figure out how do we use this from the positive side to tell the stories about the excellent experiences that people are having with the stores and sort of mitigate those poor experiences, which, for example, that could be the poor experience is rude or disrespectful time that they had in a store.
I like the way you phrased it earlier, talking about it. Let's just look at the people who don't know as undecided voters. And those are the ones we can swing. And if you can swing 15% of the population in this one question or in any other question, you've made massive, massive improvements. I think a 5% change year over year would be fantastic. And I agree with you. As an industry, we talk about the jobs are harder than they were 5 years ago. And it's because they're so much more complicated. There's more technology. We're restaurants that happen to sell gas, that happen to sell merchandise, that also have lottery, that also have this, that are 24 hours. You need to be fast. There's all these things going on. And at the same time, as you touched upon, the lack of civility and what are the opportunities there? And I think there is an opportunity. Right before the pandemic, Adam, we did a bunch of focus groups where we talked to consumers and we asked them about their favorite experience in a store. And I remember this was literally right before the pandemic, like a month before. And the one thing that came up in a number of focus groups is the idea of pay it forward. And their most memorable thing that happened at a convenience store is when somebody demonstrated kindness to somebody else, and then that person demonstrated kindness to somebody else, and all of a sudden, you've changed a subculture of society.
Absolutely.
And everybody
one of the
felt really
things
good.
that we've seen historically, year over year, with the surveys that we've done for NACS, is that the convenience store is a bit different than other forms of retail that are in the community. They're actually part of the community. They're not just a store that's there and not just products being sold. They're very valuable members, and not just because we literally sell an essential product, right? And as you said, during the pandemic, right, we were one of the essential businesses still there, but we last, right, within the community. As it's been joked before, but it's factually true. It's one of the few jobs that can never be outsourced. There's no way to actually go fill your tank remotely or digitally or ship the convenience store jobs to China or somewhere else. That can't happen. So we're physically in the community, but we also do a lot within the community, whether it's giving to the little leagues or charity events. There's that connection that people have. And we're also a product that people buy. Again, there's no difference in price for different ages or different genders, but there's all different walks of life need to come into the convenience store and buy the products, because whether you're young or old, once you get your license and once you start filling up a car and driving, really the only place to do that most of the time is at a convenience store in most communities. And that makes us a touch point that lasts with people throughout their entire life. And that's, again, a big opportunity to develop and foster good relations and good experiences with customers. But the flip side of that is also the competition within our industry, right? There's not a monopoly. There's usually a convenience store or a gas station opposite side of the intersection or opposite side of the street that also wants to vie for that same customer. So we always have to stay on our toes. And it's good for business, but it's also good for the customer as well. So that's what makes us, I think, unique. It's different than a store that only sells a single product that's only used by a subset of the marketplace.
And we tend to always ask about community issues. And this, we have other surveys. We'll have another podcast shortly to talk about another survey that we conducted. But one final thing, and then we'll talk about the third issue that I had promised. But we asked about community, and we asked about two specific things. One is, would you be more favorable or less favorable about a convenience store? And here's two different things. One is 72% would be more favorable to retailers that partner with nonprofits dedicated to raising awareness of human trafficking and identifying victims. Only 5% would be less favorable. That's a landslide, as you would say in polling. And that's something that NACS and the industry is working together to play a role with eyes and ears on that. So that's an awesome verification that what we're doing is right. Another one that is much, much more recent is we want to know about Narcan. And 64% of consumers say they are more favorable to stores that have Narcan available in the event somebody does have an opioid overdose. They don't see it as a negative. Only 7% see it as a negative. So two things to think about in terms of overall messaging. And there's, of course, many, many other things in community, but those were two we tested in this. So with that, let's just go to the last topic, and it's not necessarily uplifting. So we will make it uplifting at the end, but we want to talk about crime and what's on people's minds with crime. Do you want to kind of give us an overview of what we learned?
Absolutely. So one of the things, starting higher level, right, before we dive into C-stores, let's talk about all retail, because there's a lot of talk constantly about crime and retail theft and all types of things that's going on. But again, how is this impacting people in their day-to-day lives? We know they're impacted by inflation. We know they're impacted by gas prices and all sorts of things. But what they're hearing on crime is impacting them? So we asked, in the past year, have you felt the need to change your shopping habit because you feel unsafe or uncomfortable at a particular retail store location? For example, did you change where you shop, like the location, or when you shop, the time of day? And in fact, a third of the people have. So that's pretty alarming that 1 in 3 people actually said, I'm going to make a change to my day-to-day life about either where I shop or when I shop. So that's worth mentioning.
That's a big number.
Yep. And then when we go again, not necessarily to the C-store level, we're talking broader retail. But in the past year, have you been to a retail store that keep their products behind locked security cases to prevent them from being shoplifted or stolen? 72% say yes, they've been to a store where they see this happening. And not only that, we asked a follow-up of the people who've seen the lockup items. We said, is this something new or was it always this way, right? Because there's a lot of products that have always been locked up in certain stores. That's not necessarily new. But 60% say that this is something that's relatively new. So this is a growing trend that people are seeing, right? 7 in 10 people have been to a store in the past year that has the products locked up. And more than half of those folks say this is something new. And then even also, again, this is impacting the psyche of what people are seeing. Almost half of them, 49%, had been to a retail store that had private security guards to prevent shoplifting and crime. So the retail experience has actually been changing in a lot of stores throughout the country, not necessarily gas stations, though that's up in the news once in a rare while. But they're seeing this in their day-to-day life, and it's very much impact feeling about things at a global level, right? There are feelings on the economy, there are feelings on how things are going in society, how things are just going in general. And again, it's mostly pointing negative right now.
Well, there was some good news in the crime research that we did. We asked a forced choice question, and you can only pick, well, of course, 9% pick don't know. But besides that, you can only pick one of two answers. One is problems and crime might occur at convenience stores and gas stations, but the stores are not the cause. The other one is C-stores and gas stations attract problems and crime in communities. And what we found is by a more than 3-to-1 ratio, people felt that crime may happen at the stores, but they're not the problem. 72% said that, and only 21% said that convenience stores are the problem. Now, 21% is 21% too high, but at least that was encouraging news that people see some of these issues that we've talked about. Inflation, concerns about the economy, concerns about crime, and they don't directly link it to convenience stores, but part of a broader issue that we're all dealing with.
Correct. I see this as a sort of positive sign for when we're fighting the NIMBY fights and fighting fights about store construction or renovations that need to happen. There are a chunk of people who say that the stores bring the crime, right? The stores bring trash and blight and drug and homelessness and robbery and carjacking, and they see the store as the source of the problem. But that's only 1 in 5 people, right? 7 in 10 people are saying, no, it's sort of coincidental, right? Because it's a store that's 24/7. It's a store that literally at the intersection of the community. It's at a high traffic area. It's open all the time. It's open 365 days a year. That's why there's occasionally problems there, but it's not the store bringing the crime there. And again, to circle back and sort of make it into a positive, I think the more and more we do to increase the opportunities where people say, I had an excellent time, or even just I had a good time the last time I went to a convenience store, so that they're not saying I had a time or I had a poor time. And these don't have to be related to crime. Of course, going into a convenience store and not having a criminal experience, absolutely, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But every time that it's just walking out of a store and saying, I have a smile on my face, right? Or that was nice. And something that's not just because of the product, but because of the people, that's going to help over time shift these numbers. They're not in a disastrous shape. I wish we had these numbers from years and years and years ago, but this is time we started asking this question. But shifting this, I think, makes us stand on easier ground as we do things like folks building new stores, folks doing renovations, or just being part of the community. We want to be seen as a positive part of the community, positive solutions, and not a negative thing. We want to be associated with all the good stuff. And there's enough content and fodder out there to do that, but I think that's also where NACS plays a role of helping tell those stories.
Yeah, and I think one of the words we used in the article was an oasis of normalcy, where it just allows somebody to escape any of the negative thoughts that they're feeling because of all the other issues going on, and just feel good coming in your store. Doesn't have to be amazingly fun. You don't have to have all these bells and whistles, but just feel good about coming in there. And that's gonna keep swinging the doors. And that's why we do this research, to just give our industry a better sense of what's going on in people's minds so you can make business decisions to bring them to your stores and keep them coming back. So, Adam, it's always great talking to you about surveys, what's on people's minds. We'll have more to report in another couple weeks on another survey we did that we looked at more gas-related issues. But thank you for joining us today and taking us through the journey that we were on in looking at how people feel about prices, about jobs, and about crime, and what you all can do about it. So thanks for joining us today, Adam.
Thanks for having me on.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.